That it plans to build a new jail in Ottawa that is 25% bigger, with 140 more spaces, at a cost of $500 million to $1 billion. A large number of people locked up in the Ottawa jail have mental health or drug issues. They are often poor or homeless people, often racialized, often incarcerated because of minor, non-violent charges or relatively trivial breaches of bail conditions. Given this, do you think spending $500 million to $1 billion building a bigger jail is the most effective and humane use of taxpayers' money to address social problems in Ottawa that lead to people being incarcerated? If not, what alternatives would you push for? And Monsieur, you have 2 minutes first to go on this.
I think that people that they go to jail for something they've done doesn't stop us of thinking of them that they are part of our society and part of our community. So we have to pay attention to them and to the way they live in the jails. So spending money to make their life there easier is good, and at the same time we like to spend more money on their education, on their how to show them how to go back. They can go back to the community and be active in the communities, and they go to the force work again and be part and help and be voters too and vote for us tonight or on the election days. So we like to have their life exactly the way we ask for any other persons that they live in that community. Now, by spending so much, we don't know exactly where. We need experts to look into that, and we need the people that they are working. For sure, if I get elected, I'll have people, advisors, they are working and they pay attention to what exactly needed and to value the projects and how much it costs. And for sure, if we are in the government, for sure we're not going to have any single penny waste on waste or mismanagement. It's going to be all to the projects. Whether the project costs $500 million or less, we're going to make sure the money is spent the right way. Thank you.
Merci. Madame Desrosiers?
Oui, la question, je pense, doit être analysée sous deux angles. There's two aspects to this question. The first one is certainly, how do we reduce the number of people that end up in jail that should not be there? And I think in the budget, there's a big investment in mental health, $2.1 billion, the biggest investment ever in the history of Ontario, and it's directed to this. There's other ways in which that you want to prevent people ending up in the justice system when they don't belong in. Certainly a mental health investment, good investment in high school education where there are adequate services for the teachers and for the students to actually find some hope and find some ability to see a future for themselves. We're cracking down on the black market, on drugs by moving out of, by legalizing cannabis, which comes from the federal government, but that again will provide some less people being caught in the justice system. So there's many ways in which we want to continue to ensure a society that does not throw people in jail because there's nowhere else for people to go. Having said that, and the second part is the current facility appropriate for this day and age? Probably not. I don't agree that it should be bigger, but certainly I think we know there's some problems there. I'm not completely familiar with all the details of it, but I know that my commitment for me would be to continue to invest in mental health, to ensure that indeed, no matter that we continue to have, and we have made progress on rehabilitation, we have made progress on high school graduation rates, and we want to continue to do that.
Merci, Madame Desrosiers. Ms. Evans, please.
So the short answer to that question is no. We should not be building bigger jails as a society. The long answer to that question involves talking about how we criminalize people who are struggling. So studies have been done, and 2/3 of people in jail for low-level drug crimes without violence are people who have been abused as children. And that is tragic, and it means that we are re-punishing people who have already been hurt by society. And if we want to commit to helping them, it means that we need to properly invest in our mental health system. And the Liberals have had 15 years to invest in mental health. And this election, they've decided it's their big push, it's what they want to invest in this time. But they've been cutting healthcare services over the last 15 years. And to me, it's really, really disingenuous to say, we are going to solve this problem now that we've observed it. When people have been observing this for decades, they have been seeing the need in their communities. They've known friends or cousins, people who have ended up needing to use supportive housing or needing to use addictions programs. How many people, if I were to ask everyone to put their hand if they know someone who struggles with alcohol abuse? I see no hands, and that's probably not the truth. So when you look at it like that, how many of our people are struggling? We need to do better. The NDP has had a long, strong commitment to funding mental health. We've committed to putting a mental health professional in every high school, because that is going to be the #1 way to help people out of a cycle that they're going to end up in. It's the #1 way to help people who are struggling in school, and to make sure that we provide for everyone in our society, to make sure that nobody is left behind. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McLean, and then I'll come back to Madame Desrosiers.
Thank you. Well, yeah, we also agree. The answer is no. We should be focusing on the root causes. And specifically, I'd like to add something. I mean, definitely much more funding for mental health. Let's also identify the opioid crisis as a serious priority, and identify it so the government can work to integrate action in this area. Affordable housing to include social housing for those that need it, supportive home situations. And in terms of Aboriginal persons, Indigenous persons being overrepresented in our penal systems in Canada, we have to recognize that in building this country and province, treaties were broken, land was taken unceded, and Indigenous rights were violated. And policies of assimilation through programs like the residential schools and the 60s Scoop have had terrible repercussions for generations of people. And it's time for meaningful action towards reconciliation now. There's a whole number of things that we need to be doing in this regard, including increase the number of Indigenous healthcare and education professionals, and support their retention within Indigenous communities. Include specific engagement and implementation plans to address the need of Indigenous people in child and family services. You mentioned the impacts of early childhood abuse, and then we'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Madame McLean. Madame Desrosiers has asked for an additional minute on this topic.
Yes, I think I just wanted to make sure that we were not left under the impression that there had been no mental health funding for the last 15 years. I've been there only 18 months, and I know that I've called many agencies to support them in adequate funding for their services that they were offering, whether on dependency, addiction services. So I know that there's been lots of funding, and I know that the budget for healthcare has continued to grow for every year for the last 15 years, or maybe probably earlier than that, because what the problem is we didn't speak too much about mental health before. And now that we're understanding better the range of issues that are involved, it's necessary to go further. And I agree with this, and that's what I want to fight for, is a more comprehensive approach and a deeper approach to really understanding better what mental health means for people. Merci.
This topic has obviously struck a chord. Mr. Nimmer, you want an additional minute? It's yours.
Our party will will invest $1.9 billion in mental health care and addictions. And plus the federal government is going to add the same amount, so it's a $3.8 billion going to be spent toward like the mental health system. So we're going to make sure the mental health care be treated like any health issues. And we're going to focus on them. And by adding housing, we're going to invest in homes like for addictions to treat people, to bring them back to the society. And every penny that we spend from that $1.9 billion, we're going to make sure it's going to the right place.
Thank you. Madam Evans, an additional minute.
So you talk a good game, Natalie, but let's talk some numbers. There are 13,000 people waiting on average 5 years for one of Toronto's 5,000 units for mental health and addiction supportive housing. That is not acceptable. There is an average wait time of 18 months for someone under 18 to see a publicly funded psychologist or psychiatrist. That is not acceptable. These things have been let to happen under the Liberal government, and you can't sit here and say you've been providing the funding that they need when the reality is so obviously against that. When you look around, I know story after story of people in university who can't see a counselor because there isn't the funding for it. I've heard story after story of families who believe that their teens are struggling with depression, but they can't afford to bring them to a counselor. And it's not okay to try and tell people that you've been funding mental health properly, when the reality is so blatantly obvious to everyone who looks at it. Thank you.
Please, your best. Moving on.